Welcome to Be Global Podcast, the show that explores the fascinating world of investment migration. I'm your host, Gizane, and today we are going to delve into the evolution of the American diaspora over the years. Our guest is Doris Speer, the president of the Association of Americans Resident Overseas, also known as AARO. It is a global non-profit organization that addresses all the issues that Americans face when living abroad and advocating for their fair treatment by the US government. Doris, welcome to the show. Also joining us is Laura Madrid Sartoretto, Head of Research at our Global Intelligence Unit. She will bring her expertise on global relocation to discuss with Doris on trends and challenges faced by US citizens living abroad. Before we dive into the current state of US citizens living abroad, I'd like to set the stage with some numbers on US expats. So, Doris, thank you for being here. Laura, thank you. I'm sure you're aware of it, or perhaps Laura, because she ran a really deep study on US citizens living overseas. But there are currently 9 million US citizens living outside the United States. It indicates a robust trend of Americans' presence worldwide. Yeah. But when we talk about the diaspora, it's very different from the traditional diasporas. Because they often began with economic hardships, conflicts, or forced migration. The American diaspora is largely a phenomenon of expatriation, where individuals choose to live abroad for a variety of reasons, which could include retirement, education, just personal preference, employment, and so on. So, now, on the numbers, Mexico and Canada tend to be the top destinations. Around 1.5 US citizens residing in Mexico, and Canada, nearly 900,000 as of 2023. I know in Portugal, there are over 7,000 Americans living here. Do you have any data on France, Doris? How many Americans are living there at the moment?
That is a very good question because the numbers of Americans living in various countries, depending on who you speak to, vary greatly. We did an analysis of this just a few months ago based on various data points, and we see that there are about 100,000 Americans living in France, depending who you talk to. And in fact, even the 9 million number by some is far less. Because the 9 million number for some comes from the State Department. And according to another branch of the US government, this 9 million number includes not just those living abroad, but those traveling abroad. So let's say people on holiday, people passing through, students in school and such. And so therefore, really, nobody really knows the precise number of Americans living abroad. So it's an educated guess. It's somewhere between, let's say, 5.5 million and 9 million, depending on how well you can actually delve into the numbers. So I say that 100,000 in Paris, and I'm sorry, in France, but that's not necessarily correct. And as the days pass, it becomes different because life changes.
Definitely, yeah. And this data, is it from the French government that you...
No, because there is no official source. The U.S. Embassy does not keep track. The U.S. Embassy in Paris, for example, does not keep track of the number of Americans living in the United States. One can register with the embassy, which is a smart thing to do, for purposes of receiving notification in the event of world events that would require one to leave the country, but one is not required to do so. And so the French government does not know. But there's all kinds of data points that other people use in order to make this estimation.
Interesting. Do you have anything to say? Because you
Yeah,
keep
I
looking.
when I was researching on the numbers, I actually came into your analysis. You have I think three data points that you mentioned: the U.S.
Yeah.
State Department, and then an expert estimation. And what I would say, the takeaway from this from this subject is that we need more research and we need to better track these movements of people, because we can do that, but for some reason, of course, because research is expensive and surveys are expensive, for some reason we don't have exact estimations of people relocating, even from a country like the US, like developed country. The states still they pass on keeping track of those movements. So you have estimations, but as Doris says, life changes every day. But there is a trend, and then experts like Professor Kirsten Stewart and Professor Peter Spiro, they identify a trend of U.S. citizens wanting to relocate.
I see.
For several reasons.
Laura's absolutely right. There are more and more Americans going overseas, especially since COVID.
Okay.
We've seen that. So
Yeah.
whatever the number is, it's going up.
Yeah. Okay, so I know we jumped headfirst into our subject here, deep with numbers and so on, but I want to slow down the pace because I want our audience to know more about Doris before we talk about, what you do here, because it has a lot to do with the subject, okay? So Doris, you're from the United States. Whereabouts?
I was born near Detroit, Michigan, in the north.
Okay.
And I lived in New York City for many years before coming over to Paris. And my relocating to Paris is interesting because I've come at two different stages of my life. I came in my 20s as a student, as a musician. So I did it on my own with no help from anyone, all my own papers and trying to get a job, trying to get an apartment and such. And I was in Paris, didn't speak a word of the language. And I learned it, of course. I was here for 2.5 years at that time, went back and decided to come back the correct way, became a lawyer, worked in New York, then moved to a French company, which moved me to Paris. And so therefore I did it in, let's say, an easier way, whereby I had assistance from a company such as Laura's, which helped me with what I needed to learn and to do in order to move successfully to France.
Okay, so musician, which instrument did you play?
Percussion.
Percussion, okay. Musician, then lawyer, New York, and then Paris. I bet the transition wasn't that, because the fame of the New Yorkers and the Parisians, they all tend to be a bit grumpy and so on. I guess Parisians more. New York quite fast. So how was the transition? You moved into these two cities. Did you settle well there?
I think
Initially?
I settled quite well. I found Paris to be a much easier city to live in than New York. I'm a type A personality naturally, and New York just accentuated that aspect of my personality. So I found that in Paris, I was being actually pulled back a little bit. And I worked in a French company. I had French people working for me. So I had to very quickly learn how to adapt to the French way of working. And I had started my career in one of the Wall Street law firms. So 100-hour work weeks were normal for me, which is not normal in France.
Yeah.
So I had to be as the French. And so that was, for me, a very big cultural change.
Yeah.
But it was a good change. I learned to live life, to enjoy life, the cafe society, as well as working hard, learning how to be productive within a shorter work day.
Yeah.
And such. So I love life.
Oh, great. Great. I envy you. I want to move to Paris now.
Oh, it's worth it.
I know, it's lovely. So tell me, you experience some challenges which are normal when you are moving to another country, but were any of those challenges the motivation behind the creation of the AARO, or tell me a bit more how AARO came into your life?
Well, how AARO came into being is different from how AARO came into my life.
Okay,
I can
yeah.
tell you maybe about how AARO came into being and then how I
You
came
choose the
into
route.
Yeah,
It's
whichever.
yours.
AARO is celebrating its 50th anniversary, as Portugal is. AARO was
Oh,
formed
congratulations, AARO.
Yes, congratulations, Portugal also. AARO was formed in 1973 by a small group of American women who were unhappy with the fact that they could not transmit citizenship to their children, unhappy that children who did have the American citizenship could lose it if they did not satisfy residency requirements.
Hang on, American women could not transmit the citizenship to their children.
Born abroad.
Born
Let's
abroad.
say a woman
Okay.
in Paris has a child in Paris. That child was not automatically American back in 1973. And if one took the citizenship of another country at that time, one could lose the American citizenship.
Yeah.
So they started AARO to advocate for on the citizenship basis. And again, it was a group of women, and one of the founders, she said, well, if we're going to go and advocate before Congress, we're going to need some men. So they admitted men to the association, and the men have been great. And so they advocated on citizenship. They then added voting, because at that time, it was practically impossible for an overseas American to vote. And over the ensuing decades, they've added taxation, banking, financial reporting, which are newer issues, Social Security, and Medicare. And so today, AARO is an association with members in about 40 countries of the world, advocating on all these issues. And our mission is education and advocacy. Education of our elected representatives of the issues we're facing overseas. They have no idea, many of them. And then advocating to change the laws, rules, and regulations that negatively affect us. That's the external aspect. Internally, we have members. And so we educate our members on their rights and responsibilities as American citizens, and we help them. We help them navigate those issues. That's our mission. In fact, I can put our issue in 4 words, which is Americans helping Americans abroad.
Yeah.
So that's AARO.
That's AARO.
Yeah. I've come into AARO, only in the last 10 years or so. I was in France working for a French company, very upset that I was double taxed.
Okay, yeah.
And I had an American boss, and I complained bitterly about the taxation. I had no idea why. I didn't know any of the issues. I was just a lawyer working, doing international mergers and acquisitions, running around the world, and not really focused on being an American.
Yeah.
And he said, well, there's this association in Paris. Why don't you join them? And I thought, why not? If they know something about tax.
You did something very French.
Sorry. And so I joined AARO, and then soon after, we got kicked out of our bank because banks don't like Americans with foreign addresses. And the banking person at AARO helped me. The tax person at AARO helped me. And then I had a girlfriend who had an issue with Social Security. There's something called WEP, the Windfall Elimination Provision. And I needed information for her on that. Someone at AARO helped me with that. And I thought, my goodness, this is a pretty good association. I'm going to get more involved. And I then eventually got on the board. And a couple of years ago, there was a vacancy in the post of president. And I thought, well, I can help.
Yeah.
A lot of the issues are legal issues. And I thought, well, that would be something I could do with my time. Now, this is a volunteer organization. We are not paid persons. And I saw these wonderful people who are dedicating their free time to helping Americans navigate living abroad. And I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. And I thought, well, I've been helped. Let me throw a few years of my time into this and see if I can make change. I've never done that before in my life. I'm not a volunteerist by profession. I'm a lawyer, for goodness sakes. So I thought that I would do that. And it's wonderful. It's exercising that part of my legal brain for the good
Yes, of course.
of human beings across the table from me.
Yeah.
And I like that.
This is excellent. So when did you join AARO as a member?
Maybe 10 years ago.
Okay.
I can't remember, something like that.
And
I
then-
was a member for years before becoming on the board.
Okay, and AARO is present in about 40 countries, yeah? So I guess you have members there that also help with the practicalities and challenges. So the ladies of AARO pretty much preceded the trend of digital nomadism, because from far and apart, being apart from each other, you helped other expats with their journey to acquire citizenship or just to settle either temporarily or permanently at a place. But yeah, it must be quite hard to run an organization in many different parts of the world.
Well, what we do is the advocacy branch of AARO is basically to talk to members of Congress to try to change the laws. We try to help people by getting the laws changed, which negatively affect their rights. We don't go to Singapore to help somebody in Singapore navigate living in Singapore. Yeah. We're different from what Laura does. And it's an interesting, we're very complementary.
Yeah.
We help people once they're already overseas. If they get kicked out of their bank, for example, we help them to try to find a bank where they live, which maybe could take them on.
Yeah.
Or if they have issues with their taxes, we can maybe lead them to a professional that can help them. But we don't give tax advice ourselves, but we lead them to the people who can do so. And some people, for example, on the windfall elimination provision, there are ways that one can avoid it in certain countries, and we advise them, if you do it this way, you might get an exemption from it.
Yeah.
And then just simply getting people to register to vote. It's difficult still, or complicated, to register to vote in some states. It's different in every state. And so we help get people registered and let them know, this is how you can vote. You've got to register now because you need time to get that ballot and to mail it back, because in some states it has to arrive by the postal mail.
Oh, it's not done at the embassy, the local embassy, no.
No, it depends on the state. Every state of the United States has its own rules, and you have to know what they are. There's a federal law that guarantees a federal right to vote, but it relies and there's a federal process, but there's also a state process, and it's different. And sometimes you can vote by email. Sometimes you have to mail something in and then get something mailed back, fill it out, mail it again. And if you're living in a far-flung country with very slow mail, you might not, and you don't know if your ballot has even arrived sometimes. Some states are very good about that. I'm lucky in that my childhood best friend worked in the county clerk office in the district where I voted, and she would say, "Okay, Doris, I've received your ballot." So I was very lucky. But she's now retired, so I have to do it like everybody else.
Yeah.
But so we help people register to vote, and in this election year, voting is so important.
Exactly.
Of course, yeah.
And very few Americans abroad do vote, and that's the bottom line to our issues, is that Americans are not heard because the elected representatives in the United States don't care, because we don't vote as a bloc. We vote, each American abroad votes in the last state in which he or he had residence. And so I vote in the state of Michigan. Someone next to me votes in Texas. The person next to me on the other side votes in Massachusetts. And so all of the people at AARO, we vote in 40 different states. So we cannot speak with one voice to one representative. And so they always ask us, how many of your members are in Montana? Maybe one, I don't know. So it's hard to convince them that we are a significant constituent bloc. And that's the problem. And a lot of Americans abroad also don't vote because it's complicated still, even though there is now the laws in place which guarantees the right to vote in federal elections. So that's the problem.
I'm glad you're sharing this with us, because our audience is mostly from the USA. So I don't know if they are based in the USA, but if they are based in other countries and they hear what you're saying right now, I'm sure they will find it helpful as well to understand it. And that voting is very important, and there is a way for you to vote. So just get yourself informed. I also would like to ask, what other challenges often happen with US citizens abroad that AARO has, intervened or helped educate and so on? Health insurance, perhaps?
Well, we provide a health insurance plan for our members, and this is a plan tailor-made for Americans who are living outside of the United States. We put this plan in place, I'm going to say 1987 or so, and it was created precisely for Americans abroad. The insurance is offered in almost every country of the world, wherever you reside. One can even choose 2 resident countries. If, for example, you live in France and you have a summer home in Switzerland, each of those countries is considered a resident country for purposes of reimbursement. And very importantly, the insurance also covers one if one goes back to visit, say, people in the United States, family and such, and has an issue there, an accident or an emergency in the United States. The insurance will cover up to 30 days in the United States, as well as coverage when you're traveling elsewhere in the world, easily portable, no age limit, no reimbursement limit. There's some very nice bells and whistles, I would say, to this plan that we offer. And it can be what we call first euro, meaning your primary insurance, or it can be what we call in French mutuelle, which is the supplemental. If you're in a country where you have the national health insurance, as in France, then you can use this plan as your supplemental. So you can do it that way also. It also has various levels of reimbursement, gold, silver, all those kinds of things. You can find that on our website.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. It's just because I think it's interesting that we covered the educational element of, the voting difficulties and challenges, but it is possible depending on each state, and you just need to go and find information. We talked about healthcare. And then one subject I know you don't want to talk about, but I will ask anyway, is the US tax system.
Oh, boy.
How are you or AARO actively involved in advocacy efforts to reform the citizenship-based taxation system?
Yes, that is the holy grail for AARO, as well as other overseas organizations. What we would like to do is, of course, eliminate citizenship-based taxation, replace it with what is called RBT, residency-based taxation, or source-based taxation. The different organizations overseas have different views on what that would look like, because unlike some of the other issues that we advocate, which are a little easier, reform of taxation requires a huge change to the tax code, which is it would be a difficult exercise, because we've been working with another organization on how this would look. We have a 3-page white paper that we're working on, and we're trying to propose conceptual, let's say not legislative wording, but conceptual concepts, and eliminating CBT requires many changes to the tax code. And there would be winners and losers. There are, let's say, the vast majority of Americans abroad do not want to be taxed by the United States on their worldwide income. When I worked in France for a French company, for example, I was subject to tax by the United States on the same income to which I was subject to tax by the French government. The credits are not 100%. Yeah. So one is, in effect, double taxed. And also when it comes to, let's say, one's retirement plan, the retirement plan, the tax advantages that one has on retirement plans in the United States, they're qualified plans, so you're not taxed on the earnings and such. Well, if you have a plan such as that in your country of residence with your employer in your local country of residence, the U.S. government does not recognize that as a qualified plan. So your home country will not tax you, but the U.S. will.
Yeah.
So there are many ways to go about this. Of course, getting rid of CBT in and of itself would eliminate many, many issues. But we are also looking at what I call picking at the low-hanging fruit.
Okay.
If we can find little bits and pieces of things that could make life better for some without losing sight of the overall goal, we will do that. But we actively advocate to eliminate CBT, and we go on an annual basis to Washington, D.C. This year we're going the week of June 3rd.
Okay.
6 of us from AARO go, and we run up and down the Capitol steps, trying to meet with as many people as possible. We're currently making our appointments now. Last year we had 60 meetings, 60.
Wow.
60. Wow.
Every 30 minutes. Every 30 minutes, 2-3 at a time, running all over the place, meeting with people and advocating on all the issues for Americans abroad. It's an annual, we call it Overseas Americans Week, which is a trademark AARO event. Other overseas organizations do something similar. They call that door knock. The Democrats abroad do it. I believe the Republicans overseas might be doing it. There's another group that might be doing it. But what's very important is AARO is nonpartisan. And that is our claim to fame. We're not famous, but that helps us when we advocate, because we can talk at 2 p.m. to a Republican, at 2:30 to a Democrat, and then at 3 o'clock to an independent, and then we just complete the cycle again, because we talk the issues. And we can get into all those doors. And there are some issues that a Republican congressperson would be more amenable to, and different issues that a Democratic would be more amenable to. And there are some which are bipartisan. Whoever they are, we talk to the source. And we raise the issue that we think that they're going to care about. And circle back and finish on the citizenship-based taxation. The difficulty with that is, of course, the revenue. The U.S. government believes that it would lose a huge amount of revenue if it were to eliminate CBT. And so there are all kinds of studies being made as to how much revenue would that actually be, because of this large number of Americans living abroad, whatever the number is, up to 9 million. There's a far less number of U.S. tax returns being filed. That we know because they're filed. And I'm going to say it's about 1.5 million or something like that. So, I'm throwing that number out. I could double check that. But it's a far smaller number of tax. And many of those people who file those returns are not paying taxes because of the income exclusion. And so the requirement to file a tax return, in essence, is not as revenue generating as some may believe, because so many Americans are not paying taxes if they earn below a certain amount because they have an exclusion, but yet they have to pay $1,000 to $3,000 per year to their tax preparer to actually file the return, to realize they don't pay any tax. And so, but there are, of course, some very wealthy people abroad who do pay a significant amount of tax to the U.S. government. And there are ways that you can still capture that and still make life easier for the people who would not pay tax anyway. And so all the various organizations overseas are, let's say, slicing and dicing, cutting the sausage, I guess you could say, to find a way to make life better for some, or as many as possible, but still trying to convince the U.S. government that you are not letting people be tax cheats. There's this perception that Americans abroad are rich.
Yeah, true. But do you anticipate any positive changes coming, to less the burden of Americans overseas with regards to their taxes? At least, if you are under the bracket, but you still need to file your tax, so you go part away with $3,000 US just to say that that you're filing your tax return. Do you think that will be changed somehow soon?
I must be hopeful. There's a bill in this Congress, which is called the Tax Simplification Act, which was also presented in the 117th. And will it pass to this Congress before the end of this calendar year? Possibly not, probably not. But it's been proposed again, and it would lessen the burden, if this were to be passed, on many Americans abroad. It would increase the income exclusion, so many fewer would have to pay tax. It also would simplify the tax form itself to where one would maybe not have to hire an outside advisor to do them. And it would consolidate the financial reporting, which is currently FATCA and FBAR, which are two separate reporting requirements. It would ease the burden there. I see it being more probable that there be movement in the FBAR area and the FATCA area than in the CBT area.
Yeah.
But it just depends on how successful all the various overseas organizations such as AARO are in educating the members of Congress. And the number one education is to convince them we are not fat cats. The reason it's called FATCA is a play on word with fat cat.
Yeah.
We are not fat cats. And so we have to keep reminding them that we are just normal people.
Normal people, yeah.
Like people in Iowa, Missouri, whatever state. We just happen to want to live somewhere else. And why do I have issues with my bank account down the street from me in Paris? Why do I have to provide all this information under penalty of huge fines for my local bank account from which I take money to pay my rent and buy my groceries when someone in Missouri doesn't have to? That's not fair. So those are the kinds of arguments that do resonate with many congresspersons. And so we have to keep making those arguments and letting them know that we are not any different from their resident constituents. And a lot of these laws were put in place not intentionally to screw us, but because they just didn't think of us. I'm giving them maybe too much credit when I say that, but for example, the original FATCA law was put in place to stop resident Americans from hiding money in overseas bank accounts. We should have been exempted. We call this the same country exemption, which is what we're fighting about, which is let us have an exemption from an account in our home country. You can't, there's no counter argument to that. It is logical. So we have to keep making these really logical arguments which have no counter argument to them and just beat on the door. So that's what we do.
I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
And also, I really admire the persistence because that's how you win. Being persistent. It's not only about being hopeful, but trying and again and going again and again and again. So,
it's hopeful, but not without basis.
Of course. Right. So let's talk about retirement now, because you mentioned something about retirement early, and I've got interesting data also digged by our superstar research lead, Laura. So you told me, Laura, that the World Bank data suggests that 10% of the global population, more than nearly 800 million, is currently aged 65 and above. Okay. So in the United States, the rate of aging is markedly accelerated, with the country having more than 17% of its population at the age of 65. And then, but you also told me something which I didn't make a note, I'm sorry, something about 2025.
Yeah, because the numbers are going to skyrocket in the next decade. So we are actually discussing that individuals and retirees in the U.S. Less and less can rely on social security funds and the system. So sometimes people seek relocation or even a second citizenship as a strategy to stretch their pensions further because of living costs, healthcare, and other motivations. So we were trying to do in our retirement guide for U.S. expats is identifying motivations for people to want to relocate in other countries, and using very sophisticated data analysis to establish ranking of countries where these people can find, what they want, like better quality of life, lower living costs, healthcare, and other qualities of the country of relocation where they want to relocate. So what I want to also to ask Doris is if you can identify from your membership countries where people relocate more, and why, the motivations why people want to relocate when they leave the US.
We see a lot of people coming to Europe, and a lot of the number one motivation, I do believe, is financially related, and of healthcare, for example.
Yeah.
Healthcare in the United States is very expensive. It's getting more and more expensive. And Americans are looking at how wonderful the healthcare systems are, especially in European countries. And they're looking at that. And Americans who are on the verge of retirement do have enough money to successfully live in many European countries, because the cost of living outside of healthcare is also far less. If you just take a look at living in New York as opposed to Paris, it's a huge difference.
Yeah.
And even the Southern European countries are even, let's say, more affordable for Americans who would like to retire overseas. So it's for the retirees, I would say it has to do with being able to have quality of life in a beautiful climate, to have health care when you need it, and to be able to smell the roses, and
Walk.
to have the beautiful life that you read about in these glossy magazines.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we identified when we were researching on international retirement migration, especially when we focus on American diaspora, that people were really trying to capture this European way of life, but also trying to make their pensions to stretch further, because here you have this combination of reliable public healthcare system and the supplementary insurance plans that you can also affordably acquire. Another trend that we realize from people from US expats is that more and more the second citizenship is not it's not seen as an abomination, as Professor Peter Spiro used to say. So people have more and more curiosity about the possibility of acquiring a second citizenship, and are using this possibility as a strategy to relocate in the future, or to even spend some time of the year in an European country and then go back to the United States, to not have the problem of double taxation, for instance, because they're still going to have their residence in the US. So another trend among American and US citizens, I would say, is this interest on acquiring a second citizenship by descent, or by an investment migration scheme, or taking advantages of the right to reside in another country, if the country offers a retiree visa, or all these kinds of visas that are aimed for retired people.
Yeah. So tell me more, Laura. You talking to us about your US retirement, your Global Citizen Solutions Intelligence Unit retirement study. So you are putting together it's a white paper. It's actually a white paper about trends that motivate US citizens to retire abroad. What did you find there was most most stark information that you found through your studies? Something that you didn't think of, perhaps, or a destination that is quite popular?
First of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about the methodology. we identified 8 indicators, and we divide the indicators in 3 groups. So we have quality of life, we have acceptance and
Migrant acceptance, yeah.
migrant acceptance, integration, and security, and economics. So we put our indicators, and we allocated the indicators in this main indicators, and we came up with this 16 top countries for relocations for U.S. citizens. And what we identified, first of all, when you talk about motivations, of course, economics is super important, and quality of life is extremely important as well. But more and more people are they show the desire to relocate due to security and political stability.
Okay.
And that's why the preferred countries would be European countries. Canada is still a country that appeals a lot to U.S. citizens because of the proximity.
It ticks all the boxes of Europe as well.
Culture,
minus the weather.
It is. The living costs are lower than in the U.S. It's close to your country, so you can go and visit your family. But more and more people are aiming to the European countries, and some countries in South America, for instance. We see that Uruguay is a country that people show interest in. Costa Rica, because of the proximity as well.
Yeah.
And still countries like Australia and New Zealand, they score high in the rankings because of the cultural proximity as well. Along with the living costs and the quality of life, security, and economic political stability is more and more important for U.S. citizens when they want to relocate.
Yeah. When we talk about retirement, do you also feel it's the findings that Laura shared with us? Does it resonate with AARO's members as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely. I fully agree. Those are the motivations that people do show when they move overseas. Yes.
Of course, you're going to have also issues related to family ties, and when you have to move because someone of your family is living abroad, or
of course,
you fall in love, and then you are going to relocate because of this situations. But because we live in a world and in an era of polarization, I think people, and I'm not talking about partisan decisions or anything like this, it's general political dissatisfaction. So it is triggering the desire of citizens from the US wanting to relocate in a country where either they don't have anything with the politics of the country, the local politics, or the political system is more stable, and they know they're going to have their civil, political, and economic rights respected. So we identify this trend.
Okay, that is very powerful, and I'd like to explore a little bit more. But not on the political drive, but more on the facts that Americans are finally coming to terms with having a second citizenship won't make them less American. And it's an insurance plan that anyone with good sanity, if you have an Italian surname, if you have your called Disantini or whatever, go and find if you can get your second passports, because it is insurance. So I'm going to drop this question now. I'm sure this is what you found. But Doris, do you find this trend more popular now with US citizens. They are understanding that having a second citizenship is actually something, it's a currency, it's something that is of their benefit.
I think that Americans are starting, and I'm generalizing, of course, but I think Americans are starting to understand that they are not alone in the world. In fact, there was, I don't remember her name now, there was a politician who had a second nationality. She was running for office. She was somewhere in the north, and she renounced that second nationality because there was a hue and cry that she wasn't American enough.
All right, okay.
Because she had a second nationality, and that was within the last 10 years.
Wow.
So, but I think that there's a different view of the world from Americans, especially since COVID. A lot of people have reassessed their lives. That pandemic really changed a lot of people's mindset towards their lives, their internal lives, and looking at their lives in the world. And I see, let's say, a greater openness to looking outside of the United States. And so we deal with people at AARO who've already moved overseas because we help them once they come. We don't help them to come. So we talk to them once they're there. But I go back to the States quite a bit. I'm back 3 times a year at least, sometimes 4. And I talk to a lot of people about what I do at AARO. And I find that the people I talk to, and I'm from Detroit, I go to New York, so I have Midwest people, East Coast people, as well as people elsewhere. And I can see that there's a greater openness to life outside the United States by Americans. Is it fully open like Europeans? No. No, there's still this concept of American exceptionalism. We're the best. People who still say to me, well, why don't you come back? Why do you have to be over there? But now I think it's being said with more of a jealousy component as opposed to a negative component. And you mentioned politics briefly. We're nonpartisan, so I'm not going to say anything about politics. But there are a lot of unhappy people in the United States. And I think there's this idea that maybe life isn't so bad across the pond. And there's more of a willingness to look at it. And I think a general dissatisfaction with one's life is what causes one to Google around. And then you Google around and you see that it is quite nice to possibly go somewhere else. And they try it for 3-4 months and say, well, maybe I'll go back next year. We have friends who have come to visit us in Paris, and they've come for, let's say, 6 weeks. This is like 4 or 5 years ago. Now they're here for 3 months. And next year they want to come for 4 months. So it's creeping up a little bit.
And of course, because, America is a country that is a mix of immigrants because, at the end, the U.S. is a country that received a lot of immigration. And people always can look into their families and see if they can, acquire citizenship by descent from Italy, from Spain, or from, Portugal and many other countries. So and this is a trend because the experts say that people more and more are investigating in their families if they can acquire a citizenship from an European country. And as Doris said, they are Googling all the time and seeking if they can take advantage of a retirement scheme, a visa scheme in another country, or even investment migration if they can buy property, in an European or even in an Asian country and then acquire the right of residency or a second citizenship. So, as Doris said, I think also because of technology, communications, and because now we have this, the industry, the relocation industry is growing and more developed and it is being democratized. People can try to take advantage of the growing of the industry and the information check if they can spend 3 months a year in another country, or 6 months, or even relocate.
And I know what you mean. Sorry to interrupt. I know what you mean when you say by this industry being more democratic, because there was this perception in the past that people that lived abroad was just, the ultra super rich. And you see with the rise of digital nomadism, all powered by the pandemic, and retirees also seeking a better way of life that's different from the one they have back home. It's actually open to anyone. You just need to do your research and put effort, but you can do it.
Mm-hmm. And I have a question for you, if I may, Laura. Do you see that because of genetic testing, that people are more interested in trying to get a second passport in a country in which the genetic testing has shown that they have a lot of Scandinavian blood or a lot of Greek blood? Because now that's really proliferated. A lot of people are doing that testing, and they're realizing, the Americans, more and more, what is American? American is a glut of a lot of other nationalities. Exactly. Do you think that people are using that to try to look into second passports where they have historical roots?
Yeah, they might be using to check if they have some kind of biological link to people, to ascendants from another country. But when you talk about laws, you're gonna have the requirements stated in the law, and usually what they do is requiring like birth certificates, and also many countries, when you are in the process of acquiring second citizenship by blood, what they ask is certificate that your ascendant didn't acquire the citizenship of the country they moved to. So, for instance, if you live in the US and you have an ascendant from Italy, what you have to prove to the Italian government is that that person that went from Italy to the US didn't acquire US citizenship. Because we have more information now on genetics and on ancestry in general, it might drive people to seek their ascendants, but you're always bound by what the law says. And each country has its own nationality laws, because we don't have an international law on nationality, as you know. And still, under the law, states have sovereignty to decide who they want to give this right, the citizenship right, and who they will not grant this right. As you said when we were talking before the podcast, states still have a lot of discretion. And even like the public servant that is dealing with your documents, this person still have a lot of discretion in granting or denying the right of citizenship to a person. Yeah. It's never like a guarantee. You always have the right to file a solicitation, but you never know if you are going to be granted the citizenship
or not.
Or not.
This has been a really, really rich conversation. I'm so glad to have you two here. And just one note about the genetic test, Doris. I remember reading an article about Sephardic Jews. People just checking if they had some Sephardic Jew ascendants through the test first, and then they go through the documents and so on. But not sure if this has made the search for a second citizenship more popular, but I'm sure it certainly has sparked more interest once you find out that you've got like 70% Baltic blood or, But yeah, great. Do you have any closing remarks? Anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
Well, first, thank you very much for giving me the time and the ability to express what AARO can do for Americans abroad. I think the only thing I would say is that the world is getting smaller and people are moving and people are seeking their happiness where they can find it. And it's not always in the country in which they're born. And that's okay. And
Yeah.
I think that the various organizations such as Laura's, such as mine, if we can make that transition a better transition, then let us help you.
That's just beautiful. Because all of us in this room made this transition to another country. And it's not definite. It doesn't end there. It could be somewhere else. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Laura.
And I would say, as we also commented in the past, borders are fictionary. And because of the development of industry and telecommunications and even like mobility in general, more and more relocation, the strategy of relocating is more and more accessible. So as we said, it's not only for people that have a lot of money, the fat cats, but if you go and do your research on Google, you're gonna find that maybe you have this option, and you can even stretch your earnings and your savings further if you relocate, and you're gonna be living a different life. You're gonna be experiencing new things, living in a new context, in a different context, and I think it's always enriching.
Yeah.
And stay tuned to our US retirement guide,
which will be online soon. Yeah, of course. Maybe as you're watching or listening to us now, it is already there. But that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'll see you guys soon. Bye.